Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Today we'll be taking a look at the work that Barty Crouch Jr. did in his capacity as Hogwarts Defense Against the Dark Arts professor during Harry's 4th year at school, and whether or not it was actually a better job than the real Alastor Mad-Eye Moody could have done. Before we dive in, I will admit that this may not be the hottest take. Across the internet, from Reddit to Facebook, fans of the Wizarding World have posted similar questions and had discussions about this very topic. And yet, I still think it's worth our time in analysing. Because despite all that we feel we may know of Alastor Moody, the most amount of time spent with this character is in the Goblet of Fire. And, well, for most of that book and movie, it's not really him that we're spending time with, but a Death Eater in disguise. As a result, fans of the series may feel like they know Mad-Eye, but it was actually Barty Crouch Jr. who they got to know. So let's start things off by breaking down what we do know about the real Alastor Moody. Moody was a renowned Auror, and there are some who have even claimed that he's the most famous Auror of all time. This means that he was highly trained in both magical skills and law enforcement for the Ministry of Magic. In order to have become an Auror, Alastor would have had to have received exceptionally high marks at Hogwarts for Newt-level classes in subjects like Defense Against the Dark Arts, Potions, and Transfiguration. What's more, the work of Aurors very often focuses on subduing or defeating dark magic, as well as apprehending dark and powerful witches and wizards. This makes it imperative for Aurors to be incredibly skilled in defensive magic against the dark arts. While he likely gained more and more notoriety as an Auror over the years, Moody's magical prowess in the 1970s seems to have already been impressive enough due to the fact that he was invited to join the original Order of the Phoenix, founded by none other than Albus Dumbledore. In his capacity as a member of the Order of the Phoenix, Moody would have had a hand in battling Death Eaters and likely even Voldemort himself, further adding to his experience in dueling and defending against those who wield the dark arts. In addition to his reputable skills in defending himself and the Wizarding World population against dark magic, there's also the matter of his magical eye. But it was the man's eyes that made him frightening. One of them was small, dark and beady. The other was large, round as a coin, and a vivid electric blue. The blue eye was moving ceaselessly, without blinking, and was rolling up, down, and from side to side, quite independently of the normal eye. And then it rolled right over, pointing into the back of the man's head, so that all they could see was whiteness. Of course, being terrifying to look at isn't what made Moody's eyes so noteworthy, although it clearly caught the attention of Harry and his friends upon first seeing it. No, the thing that made Alastor's magical eye so special, and worth mentioning in today's video, is the fact that it was enchanted and could therefore see through just about anything. In fact, throughout the entire series, Moody's eye is one of the few magical objects that could see through Harry's cloak of invisibility, making it a very powerful piece of magic indeed. This, of course, meant that Alastor's eye could see through his own head, which is likely why it had the ability to rotate 360 degrees within Moody's eye socket. He also had the ability to pluck the eye right out of his face should he choose, as the magical device was detachable, which is how Barty Crouch Jr. was able to remove it from Moody's head and then wear it himself. Which brings us to a few less impressive things we know about Mad-Eye Moody. For one, there's the fact that he was ambushed and subdued so easily by the deranged Barty Crouch Jr., who, up until very right beforehand, had been imprisoned for many years. Even though Crouch Jr. had the assistance of Peter Wormtail Pettigrew, therefore making it 2 against 1, Moody, for all his reputation suggests, still should have been able to defend himself against a clearly unwell Barty and Wormtail, who had spent the better part of the past decade as a rat. And yet, as Crouch Jr. describes, Wormtail and I did it. We had prepared the Polyjuice potion beforehand. We journeyed to his house. Moody put up a struggle. There was a commotion. We managed to subdue him just in time. Forced him into a compartment of his own magical trunk. Took some of his hair and added it to the potion. So not only was Mad-Eye subdued by quivering Wormtail and deranged Crouch Jr., he also wasn't able to stop them from putting him in his own magical trunk and then taking some of his hair. Not to mention his magical eye. You would think that someone with the skills such as Moody would have been able to, at the very least, stop the 2 Death Eaters from doing some of that, or perhaps have made it even slightly more difficult for them. And yet, by the time Arthur Weasley showed up at Moody's house, the Death Eaters had everything completely under control. Moody is also described as being incredibly paranoid, so it's rather interesting that he didn't have any sort of defense charms or magic keyed specifically to him when it came to both his eye and his magical trunk, which Barty Crouch Jr. and Wormtail were able to simply stuff him into. Lastly, I'll mention the fact that, aside from Hedwig, RIP, you magnificent bird, Mad-Eye Moody was the only casualty during the Seven Potters operation, in which members of the Order of the Phoenix moved Harry from his aunt and uncle's house on Privet Drive to the Weasleys' home at the Burrow. While of course this may have just been bad luck, it does seem rather odd to me that a famed Auror with as much skill as Moody was the only person to fall during this operation, when you consider the number of much more inexperienced witches and wizards who were also a part of it, like Fleur Delacour, the Weasley twins, and the Golden Trio themselves. Obviously, each of these young witches and wizards were skilled in their own right, especially for their ages, but the fact that they all came away from the event unscathed, with the exception of George's ear, while an Auror was killed, doesn't speak highly of Mad-Eye's skills, if you ask me. Now, onto Barty Crouch Jr. and his magical abilities. To be quite honest, Barty's skills aren't all that impressive. He became a Death Eater at a rather young age, and was discovered to be fanatically loyal to Voldemort, with his devotion to the Dark Lord unwavering despite spending several years imprisoned at Azkaban. However, aside from his participation in the torture of Neville Longbottom's parents, not much is known of his exploits as a Death Eater before he was sentenced to life imprisonment. What we do know is that he seemed quite adept at using the unforgivable curses, using the Cruciatus Curse on Frank and Alice Longbottom, as well as on a spider while teaching a Defense Against the Dark Arts class to Harry and his classmates while disguised as Moody. He also put his own father under the Imperius Curse, rather successfully I might add, which is how he was able to get away from his father after first escaping Azkaban. Barty also put Victor Crumb under the Imperius Curse during the final task of the Triwizard Tournament in an effort to ensure that it was Harry who got to the trophy portkey. He also put that same spider I mentioned earlier under the Imperius Curse during his class demonstration, before finally killing the insect with a roaring Avada Kedavra. While we don't have any other on-page evidence of Moody using the killing curse, being that he was a loyal Death Eater, it's more than likely that he would have cast this spell. Whether successfully or not is unknown. So where does this leave us? Well, while I think it rather interesting to argue that Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise as Mad-Eye Moody would have been the better Defense Against the Dark Arts professor when compared to the real Alastor Moody, I'm not actually convinced that's true. Yes, I think Barty's willingness to not only teach but demonstrate the unforgivable curses made his instruction incredibly valuable, especially to Harry, Ron and Hermione, who went on to hunt down Horcruxes and battle Death Eaters in just a couple of short years. But Barty's ability to perform the dark arts are arguably not as valuable as the real Moody's skills to defend against them. Alastor Moody, as we've already touched on, certainly wasn't untouchable, and there are a couple specific instances where his skills failed him. But his experience dueling dark witches and wizards and overcoming the dark arts would have likely made him a better instructor on the subject of Defense Against the Dark Arts as a whole. With that, we've come to the end of another video. What do you think? Was Barty Crouch Jr. a better Defense Against the Dark Arts professor than the real Moody would have been? Or would Moody have done a better job than Crouch? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and to forget to live.